of a student in Australia. She was a young girl, about 14 years of age, and she commits suicide. That she had been bullied for 2 years. And it is a good school for 90% of the kids there, but their kid is falling into the 10% who is not happy. A lot of the time parents are like, just keep going to school because the school will fix it. But the school is the problem. Half of the parents are sending their kids here just so they can get the sticker on the back of their car. The worst thing you can do is to continue to drop your kid off at a front gate when they're not enjoying that school, when you know that they're having a tough time.
Welcome back to another episode of Limitless. Today we have Alex Cork with us. He's the head of admissions at the Crimson Global Academy in Australia. Alex, a warm welcome to you. How are you today?
I'm very well, Nick. It's great to be with you today.
Yeah, fantastic. And good for me to be back in Australia. I lived on the Gold Coast 6 years, but you're a bit further down, right, in Victoria?
Yeah, that's right. Kind of, dealing with, I guess, the coldest part of Australia. Well, Tassie is probably even colder than us, but yeah, the weather's not great at the moment going into winter, but hunkering down here working from home is not too bad.
Okay. Well, it's warm where we are today, I'm sure, inside anyway, so looking forward to our conversation today. And I can imagine in your work with admissions for your school and so on that you have a lot of experience to share with our listeners today, and let's get right into it, because at Limitless we're talking about the challenging parts also of our life, but most importantly then of course how we get through them. And Alex, as you and I was talking leading up to this, I know that you have a story to share. You went through something heartbreaking a couple of years ago at your school. Perhaps you can take us back there. What was it that was going through your life then?
Yeah. So at a school like ours, we deal with a lot of students, or we work with a lot of students who are coming to us due to, exceptional circumstances at their previous school. And, bullying and mental health comes up a lot. Anxiety, all these other issues are now, I guess, more and more aware or, common amongst young people. And when we just know it's more of an issue. And I think students are more aware that they can have the power to be a school refuser if they want to be, and really try and find an alternative. But there was a heartbreaking story a few years ago of a student in Australia. She was a young girl, about 14 years of age, and she commits suicide. And the story broke on the radio stations there, like the big radio station in Sydney, and it kind of gained national attention very quickly. What are we doing about bullying? How are we preventing it? All these types of things. But the thing that really struck me, the thing that really impacted me, was that she had been bullied for 2 years. Mum had gone onto the call and said to the radio host, we reported this to the school 2 years ago, and we tried different things and we did different things and whatever, but the issue still persisted, and, our daughter's now taken her life. And I broke down because I felt like there was an option for the family had they known about it. We speak to a lot of parents who are coming to us, already feeling defeated or heartbroken because their child is experiencing these hardships at school. But I always try and lift them up and say, hey, it's amazing that you're looking for an alternative. The worst thing you can do is to continue to drop your kid off at a front gate when they're not enjoying that school, where you know that they're having a tough time. That's the worst thing you can do. The best thing you could do is look for an alternative. So I took it kind of personally that this girl felt very trapped by this situation that she was in. And the parents must have felt trapped by the situation that they were in as well. Societal pressures say stay at a school because everyone tells you it's a good school, and you worked very hard to get your kid into this, quote unquote good school, and it ends up being the worst place for your child, but you don't know what else to do. And it really broke my heart that no one had really sat down to this family and said, this is what you could have done differently. This is another option that you could explore. And, we literally have kids at our school who could have potentially gone down that same path had they not left their school. And I'm really thankful that the families in those situations have sought alternatives. But I felt really personally, I was like, I was trying to call the radio station every day. I was calling all the journalists. I was like, parents need to know and kids need to know that there are other ways to get an education other than dealing with the challenges that a traditional school system might be making them face every single day.
And thank you for sharing that heartbreaking story, Alex. But yeah, so today let's unpack this, because most of the listeners to this show will be the parents. Most of them will be quite busy in their jobs. Many are senior executives in big firms, others are entrepreneurs, successful, and already feeling that they're falling short. Perhaps they struggle to give time and attention to the children because they're busy building a career, and jobs are increasingly more demanding and taking a lot of time. So how can they then be better parents when it comes to, when it comes to schooling and so on? I want to ask you about what you share there, about the selection of a school, because it could be that they feel, well, we live in this neighborhood, so this is where our children should go. But as you said, dropping someone at the gate, if that's not where the child wants to be, then we are not doing them any favors. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, and how could changing school be better for the child?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I speak to families who are, C-suite execs and these types of parents as well. They're busy, etc. And oftentimes they have, I speak to families, I guess, in two situations. One who is proactive. They can see the writing on the wall. They can see the direction that their kid is going at school. And they say, hey, we need an alternative. We want to, make an action plan now. Let's get our kid out. Right. And then the second one is the family who has relied on the school to fix it. They've said, hey, I've sent my kid to a quote unquote good school, and it is a good school for 90% of the kids there. But their kid is falling into the 10% who is not happy, who is, turning into a school refuser. And a lot of the time parents are like, well, just keep going to school because the school will fix it. But the school is the problem. It might not necessarily be the teachers. It might be the other students. It might be the environment. It might be a whole other set of factors. But the thing I always say to families is like, don't put your kid in a school like the school that you put your kid into 5-6 years ago, and it was a great fit for them 5-6 years ago. That's awesome. But things change. Your kid changes. And when I see a lot of, particularly girls aged 13, 14, these types of ages, and boys as well, particularly girls who are really struggling on the social side. If girls have very long memories for bullying, and in those circumstances, it might just not be the best school for your child now. So I think a lot of parents are like, oh, but it was such a good school 2-3 years ago. What changed? Your kid changed, the other kids changed. Whatever happens, it's time to leave and time to make a change. And I think sometimes parents are reluctant, not just because they feel like the school will fix it, but they know that like schools have long wait lists. It's sometimes hard to change into another private school, or they feel like their identity is tied up in the school as well. Like, I'm a private school parent of so-and-so school, and so they feel very loyal to the school. But at the end of the day, you got to look at the kid in front of you. And if they're having a rough time, and it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, consistently they're saying, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm really struggling, find an alternative, right? Because otherwise it can turn into full-blown school refusal, or it can even get worse.
And school refusal was perhaps not a term that existed when I went to school myself. There was only we were there or we were absent. There wasn't a school refusal. Perhaps for some of the listeners who are listening now, can you elaborate on that? What does that mean?
Yeah. So my mum was the same. My mum was saying to me, oh, so many kids are school refusers these days. They must be slackers. And I said, no, it's just kids who become more aware that they have a say in whether they go to school or not, right? And I think that empowerment side of things for students, being able to say, no, I don't want to go to school, and every day is going to be the same. It's not something that changes, one day after another. Usually it's consistent. I do not want to go to school. Some parents bribe their kids into going. Some parents try all manner of things to get their kid to go. But I think there's two camps with school refusal. There is straight up, kids who don't want to go, but sometimes they don't want to go because they just don't see the point. They're just not interested in the traditional schooling model. They don't see the point of like sitting in a classroom for 8-9 hours every day. They just don't see the point of it. Then you've got kids who are school can't. So this is a movement in Australia, and it's a really interesting one, where there's a lot of kids who would like to learn. They do see a point in school and would like to kind of graduate through high school, but they just can't go to school. And usually that's as a result of anxiety, mental health, these types of challenges that are just like, they get to the front gates of their school and they just freeze up. And so those types of students, you know, both categories, I guess, but particularly the school can't students, the ones who want to learn but just don't find that their place is at a physical school, they tend to do really well in an online environment. So they end up at CGA and often thrive.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And, you know, I can just reflect on myself then. So I didn't do so well in schools in Sweden, big classes, and, you know, my voice was not really heard. I became one of the loud kids sitting at the back of the room instead. But when I moved to Australia myself, I studied up on the Gold Coast at Bond University, and it was the early days there. It was small private classes, and we even got to know the teacher privately and so on. And I got that special attention, and I did really well. I even earned a scholarship. So I personally can definitely see that there will be different time and place and a different location, different school for different children. So what I'm hearing from you is that we should engage our children in a dialogue and try to find a good match for them.
Well, particularly like, you know, teenage kids. A lot of them, by the time they're in, you know, the high school years, they know enough about what they like and don't like to have a say in where they want to go to school. And it's something that I think we're increasingly seeing parents who inquire with us based on their child's preference. It's not a parent-led decision anymore. So when you send your kid to a primary school, your kid really doesn't have a say in it. It's just like whatever school's closest or whatever, you know, that's the school you're going to. But we're increasingly seeing parents who are saying, hey, I'm inquiring with you guys, not because I wanted to inquire. If it was up to me, my kid would keep going to the school they're going to. I'm calling you because my kid made me, right? It's a student-led initiative. So I think students, you know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, the idea of a student having a say in what school they went to was like exceedingly rare. But now I think like whether it be, you know, social media or just students having more savviness in knowing, you know, that they have a say in whether they attend or not, they can also have a say in what school they go to or not. So it is really, really interesting to kind of see students starting to have more of a say in that decision than what, as you said, 20, 30 years ago, unheard of. Like you could not get a say in it at all what school you go to. You just went to the one that your parents sent you to. But that I think is beginning to change. And I think for the better. I think for the better, you know, like the kids who make that inquiry and who come to a school like us, the parents are like, how does this impact our life if we have a kid who studies at home, right? And we say, well, like it's still led by teachers and, you know, you still have exams and all the rest of it. It's still a pathway to university. It's just change of environment. And those kids often do really well because they know what they want. And they're like, the experience of a classroom, I've done it. It's not for me. The experience of, you know, studying at home, like a lot of professionals post-COVID had no interest in going back to the office, right? You know, like I'm still working from home here. I love my colleagues, of course, and I like to see them occasionally, but I'm perfectly happy working from home. And I think, you know, that same compassion and that same understanding, when extended to students, often leads to kids being like, yeah, I'm good with not going into school every single day. I'll still have my friends. I'll still catch up with them online or in person every so often, but I don't need to be in person every single day to have a social life, to have an academic life and all these types of things.
Yeah, and I believe that many times the parent's decision might not be what is best for the child, but what is sounds or look best. It's almost like we want to drive a nice car to park it in our neighborhood to show the neighbors, right? And therefore, if we can get our child to that particular school, it has that name, or particularly
Yep.
that might be also the parents might be influenced by pressure by their social circle. So the question is,
100%.
yeah, please elaborate on that.
Oh, I remember speaking to a teacher from a top school who said, he basically said, I know half of the parents are sending their kids here just so they can get the sticker on the back of their car, like to have the school sticker on the back of their car. That kind of signal to society that we are elite, that we are doing the best by our child. You know, we've got our kid at XY, like a top boarding school or whatever it might be. And yeah, like that signal is a very strong one. And for parents, I've spoken to them when they've left those schools. We're actually running a session soon with a couple of parents who were previously at top private schools with their kids and left, right? And I've spoken to those parents before, and I was like, what was that like from a social perspective for you? And it was really funny. Some of the parents had imagined that they would have got a lot of pushback from their friends or their neighbors or from the school community. Oh, how could you leave? It's such a good school. What are you doing? You're making the wrong decision. Like, they imagined all of these things would happen. So they were like fearing the worst. But in almost every single case, that hasn't happened. You know, the family leaves, parents say, oh, I heard you're leaving. Why? And they say, it's the best thing for my kid. You know, they're not enjoying life at the school anymore. We just had to make the move. And every parent's like, hey, like, you've done the right thing. Like, that's totally fine. You do you, you look after your child. But it's very funny, like, how I honestly think there's a lot of families out there who are not moving because of this perceived, like, what would happen if type scenarios that are playing out in their head. And how do we explain it to different families, and how do we explain ourselves to all these people? You don't need to do any of that. You just say, my kid didn't like it, so we moved. End of story. Like, it's that simple. But yes, totally true that the parents are sometimes the slowest to change, and are the most reluctant to change because of whatever school that their kid's at, what that means to them from a societal or outward looking perspective.
Yeah, and if we look at the older generation, perhaps they were in the same job 20, 30, 40 years, and the loyalty was there. There was not much choice, but the world have changed. And people, if we look at the young ones, when they come in the corporate world, for example, they will do a year or 2 years, then they move to the next. Does that have something to do with it as well, that it's more opportunities and the younger generation love to see what's out there as well?
I think so. I think there's definitely like a degree of, I think there's probably an end to students staying at the one school for their entire schooling or education, and I think there's also an end to some parents, you know, that we've got to find a house, settle down. It's got to be near good schools. We've got to stay there for the next 15, 20 years as all the kids go through school. I think there's like, both on the student side and on the parent side, there is more of an understanding that, like, we don't want to lock ourselves in for the next 20 years. And these are the kind of parents who join CGA not necessarily accidentally. They join us because it's the lifestyle that they want, because it is more flexible. If they do decide to move at the drop of a hat, they don't need to change school and go through all that process as well. So they're kind of like our traveling families or lifestyle families, like all these types of families who jump on a yacht for 6 months, for example, and then just turn that into a 3-year yacht trip like one of my families did. So these types of families are quite interesting in that, like, they're probably wanting to move away from that, you know, we need to be in the one job our whole lives, or our kids need to be in the one school our whole lives. We want to experience more, we want to see more. What's going to give us that flexibility? And that's something like CGA. And sometimes they're with us only a short term. They travel the world, they come back, they go back to school. But, you know, they've still had that experience where they've traveled the world for 6 months or a year. and still kept up with their schooling.
Yeah. What recommendation would you give to any parent who is listening to this, who have a child who they know that the child is not very happy going to the school, and the relationship between the child and the parent might already turn cold? In fact, I know many parents who are not even been able to have a conversation with the child. What should they do?
Well, I think it's about helping, like making the child feel like they are part of the decision-making process as to where they want to go. You know, obviously, like some parents say, look, if I gave my child a choice, they'll just sit around and watch YouTube and play games all day. So no, I'm going to keep sending my kid to school. You'd be surprised. I've seen some kids who have like done that for a couple of weeks and they genuinely get bored of it. And they're like, oh, actually, I want to learn about, you know, maths or history or something like that instead. So they are, you know, naturally inquisitive brains, and they will start wanting to learn something, even if the games is their first type of interest that they have. But I would say, like, for parents who are feeling like their child is unhappy, let them have a say in what they want to do. Do they want to move school? Do they want to move country? Do they want to move online? Do they want to go homeschooling? You know, it's one of those things that I think a lot of parents say, but I know best. I know what's in your best interest. So no, I know you want to do all these things, but so sad, too bad. This is what you're actually going to do. But I think I'll give you a really cool example, actually, Nick. There's a family who I'm speaking to in 15 minutes. They're a family at a top school in Queensland, you know, here in Australia, not far from Bond, actually. And the kid's very bright. He's a top IQ Mensa Society student, but he's also a gamer. And the parents this is, I guess, more modern thinking. I was quite surprised by this too. The parents were thinking, oh, you know, like if our kid's a gamer and he wants to try and obtain top levels in this area, he's essentially an athlete in their mind. Yeah, let's go online. Let's give him the time. So instead of like committing, you know, school 8 till 4 p.m. or something every single day, we can give him time to work on his gaming techniques. And I was like, wow, that I think is, you know, even for these traditional, even for parents who are like open-minded, I think would be quite a push. But I think it's worthwhile, you know, having a conversation with your kid and giving them an idea of like, what would they ideally want? Maybe you can compromise and find a middle ground. You know, what you want as a parent and believe is the best fit for your child, what they want and what they think is the best fit. And that's why a lot of kids come to us, I guess, because like we feel alternate enough for the kid, but traditional enough for the family. You know, like it's online and homeschooling in the kid's mind, but for the parents, it's still, we're studying the international A levels or US high school diploma. We have kids who have got into Princeton and Oxford and these types of universities, so it feels traditional enough for them as well. And that's the compromise that some families can strike.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing on that. And what lies next for you, Alex? What are you working on? What can we expect in your, should I say, in your professional world and work?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm working on a children's book, which I'm really excited about. Well, children's / baby book, really. I've got a 2.5-year-old, and he kind of inspired an idea for a new type of baby book, which is coming out very soon. But in my world of work, I think it's really just like, right now, we're trying to look at how we can help schools to plug gaps in their teaching. I'm sure you're aware, but you know, in many countries around the world, there are teacher shortages, and you know, we're hopefully going to be plugging some gaps for these schools with our remote teachers coming into their classes. So that's something that we'll be looking to do, and yeah, just looking ahead to the, you know, growing the I guess, knowledge or understanding that online school is an option, and that families who are in extenuating circumstances can take advantage of that and help their kid out of a tricky situation. That's always something I've been passionate about, which goes back to that original story that I shared at the start of the show. So yeah, you know, really trying to help parents see that there's other things out there education-wise that could be a good fit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex, for the work you do, and I believe that you've helped many parents meaningful conversations and giving them the support so that they are indeed at the right school and feel motivated and don't feel bullied or excluded, and even worse, have any suicidal thoughts. So thank you for sharing that, Alex. Any last message you want to leave to the listeners or anything before we let you go?
No, I mean, I would just say in closing, I guess, your career, for all the business people on the show listening today, it's hard to really focus on your career when your kid's unhappy. And so, if you are wanting to find a solution for your kid, listen to them, see what kind of compromise you can find. And it might be a very eye-opening experience for you as a parent, I'm sure, to see what actually your kid loves, the way they love to learn. But don't be afraid of seeking alternatives, because the alternatives are actually much better than what you might think.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex, for that. And thanks to all the listeners as well.